Quick question for you. Have you ever thought about who's snooping on your online activity? It's not just hackers, companies, data brokers, even your internet provider. They can all peek into what you're up to online. It's kind of like leaving your front door wide open while you head out. It's not the best idea. That's where Surfshark, today's sponsor, comes in. And let me tell you, this VPN shut and lock that door up tight. They encrypt your data, keep those nosy trackers out, and let you browse privately. Plus, you can hop virtual locations, access content from over 100 countries, and a lot more. Imagine watching a show that's only available on French Netflix while you're chilling at home. Easy peasy. And with Surfshark, you can connect all of your devices, no limits. Phone, laptop, smart TV. I don't know, if you've got a Wi-Fi connected fridge, you could probably connect it with Surfshark. Oh, and here's a bonus. Surfshark blocks ads and malware, so you're not only protected, you're also surfing faster. And if you need help, they've got 24/7 customer service. Day or night, someone's there. Plus, a 30-day money-back guarantee just in case you don't like it. So, click the link in the description or go to surfshark.com/ITS for 4 extra months of Surfshark for free. Protect your online life with Surfshark and get back to browsing the web without worry. And now, into today's video. Political scandals have been around for as long as we've had politicians. In ancient times, political figures accepted bribes in return for losing battles during a war, stole money from the people so that they could live in luxury, or in the case of Caligula, turned the emperor's palace into a brothel. Now, in modern times, we've had the Watergate scandal, the Bill Clinton-Monica Lewinsky affair, and more recently, the entirety of Donald Trump's presidency. Not that political scandals are limited to the US, though. Between 1993 and 1998, Sani Abacha, the infamously corrupt ex-president of Nigeria, stole between $3 and $5 billion from the Nigerian people. From 1990 until 2000, Peru's ex-president, Alberto Fujimori, used his country's National Intelligence Service annual budgets to bribe politicians, judges, and the media. In 2006, the German technology giant Siemens was accused of handing over bribes to dozens of governments in exchange for government contracts, and in October 2016, South Africa's then public prosecutor, Thuli Madonsela, released a report titled State of Capture. In this report, she announced that the ruling ANC was no longer in charge of the country and that an emigrant family called the Guptas were now essentially calling the shots. To understand how they'd managed to do this, we need to take a step back and take a closer look at one of the key players in particular, Jacob Zuma. Jacob Zuma was born in the old Zulu kingdom in 1942, and like most black South Africans who lived in rural areas at the time, he had grown up poor and didn't receive any formal schooling. At the time, the African National Congress, or ANC, had already been in existence for 30 years, but with the implementation of the apartheid laws, their struggle for equal rights intensified. The 17-year-old Zuma joined the ANC, and when the apartheid government labeled the ANC a terrorist organization in 1960, the ANC took up arms and started fighting back. The 20-year-old Zuma joined the newly established military wing of the ANC in 1962, and that same year, Zuma and 45 other recruits were arrested and charged with conspiring to overthrow the government. He spent the next 10 years in prison alongside Nelson Mandela, and after his release, he left for Mozambique, where he trained exiled ANC members in military strategies with the help of Russian military groups. He became part of the ANC's National Executive Committee in 1977 and was the ANC's chief representative in Mozambique from 1984 until 1986, when he was forced to flee to Zambia. There he moved the ANC's headquarters to Lusaka and became the chief of the ANC's intelligence department. Following Nelson Mandela's release from prison in February 1990, the ANC leaders, who'd also been imprisoned, in hiding, or in exile, were allowed to return to South Africa. After his return, Zuma joined in on the peace negotiations between the apartheid government and the ANC. He also became the ANC's chairperson in KwaZulu-Natal, where he built a large support base that mostly consisted of other Zulus. This is an important fact to note because tribalism is still very prevalent in South Africa. Now, following the 1994 democratic elections, Zuma steadily rose to power. He became the ANC's national chairperson, then the deputy president of the ANC, all while holding a position as part of the Executive Council for Economic Affairs and Tourism in KwaZulu-Natal. But then Zuma's rising star started to flicker. In 2002, the National Prosecuting Authority and the Directorate of Special Operations, aka the Scorpions, reported that Zuma and several other ANC members had been involved in brokering a 30 billion rand arms deal to their benefit. Zuma's financial advisor, Shabir Sheikh, had been heavily involved in the bribery that took place, and he was eventually arrested and sentenced to 15 years in prison. The National Prosecuting Authority wasn't able to successfully indict Zuma on 12 corruption and money laundering charges, but the scandal seemed to follow him wherever he went. In December 2005, he was charged with sexually assaulting a 31-year-old woman who was HIV positive, and despite being acquitted during the trial, he became a national laughingstock after claiming that his idea of practicing safe sex was taking a shower afterwards. Despite all of this, Zuma was still popular within the ANC, where he was regarded as one of the ANC's struggle heroes, and he still had a large support base in KwaZulu-Natal, which is an ANC stronghold. His popularity soon rivaled that of then-President Thabo Mbeki, with the ANC Youth League's former leader, Julius Malema, declaring that he would happily kill for Zuma. And in the lead-up to the ANC's 52nd National Congress in 2007, Zuma campaigned for the removal of the Scorpions. Zuma claimed that the Scorpions had a history of targeting politicians and that, quote, oversight was needed in such an investigative body so as to avoid the agency being used as a political tool to investigate politicians. It absolutely wasn't because the Scorpions had already helped prosecute Jacob Zuma and several other ANC members on several corruption charges before. Definitely not. That wouldn't happen. But Zuma's campaign was successful, and despite national protests, the Scorpions were disbanded. Their investigators were incorporated into the newly established Directorate for Priority Crime Investigations, or the Hawks, within the South African Police Service, but in the process, their metaphorical wings were cut, and they were now under the direct control of the executive government, and in turn, the President of South Africa. According to some analysts, this move would later enable Zuma and his cronies to loot South Africa's coffers to their heart's content. During the ANC's 52nd National Congress, Jacob Zuma beat then-President Thabo Mbeki during the party elections and was elected party president, which made him the ANC's candidate for the 2009 presidential elections. But just a week later, the National Prosecuting Authority once again indicted Jacob Zuma on 8 charges of fraud, 2 corruption charges, 1 for racketeering, and 1 for money laundering. In a perfect world, this would have made Zuma ineligible to become president. But in September 2008, the charges against Zuma were dropped when the charges against him were declared to be unlawful. In response, a satirical cartoonist named Zapiro published a cartoon titled The Sexual Assault of Lady Justice, which pictured the leaders of the ANC Youth League, the ANC, the South African Communist Party, and the Congress of South African Trade Unions holding Lady Justice on the grounds while Jacob Zuma prepared to sexually assault her. And for most South Africans, it appeared as if Jacob Zuma was untouchable, especially when a perfectly healthy Schabir Shaik was released on medical parole after serving just 2 years of his sentence. Of course, Jacob Zuma denied any involvement in his release and claimed that it was well known that Shaik had always had a heart problem. On the 22nd of April 2009, the ANC won the national elections, and to the dismay of international markets and some South Africans, Jacob Zuma became South Africa's 3rd democratically elected president, quite the achievement for someone who hadn't even finished the 3rd grade. In the years that followed, Zuma became known for being South Africa's bumbling, laughing president. He struggled to read his speeches, spoke hesitantly when he had to address the nation, showed off his dance moves at political rallies, married wife numbers 4, 5, and 6, and fathered at least 20 children. Whenever his criminal offences were mentioned or Parliament questioned him about irregular spending, he'd laugh at their concerns and correct their pronunciation of Zulu names and phrases. He also flouted his relationships with influential families like the Sheiks and the Guptas, and the media soon started referring to them as Zuma's sugar daddies. The international markets, opposition parties, the South African justice system, and the media were already wary of Jacob Zuma's flawed morals, and it wasn't long before they had reason to suspect that Jacob Zuma was up to his old tricks. On the 30th of April 2013, an Airbus A330 landed at the Waterkloof Air Force Base in Pretoria. It carried 217 Indian nationals, all of whom had bypassed the usual immigration procedures by traveling directly to the military base. They were all guests of the Guptas and had traveled to South Africa to attend the wedding of a Gupta niece to a Dubai businessman. A mixture of military personnel and police escorted these guests to the luxurious Sun City resort, and several of them stayed behind to provide security for the week-long event. The Guptas had rented out the entire resort, supplied food, drinks, and entertainment for their 200 guests for the duration of the wedding, and specified that they only wanted white waiters to serve them. The guest list included several ministers, prominent businessmen, partners in auditing firms, politicians, President Jacob Zuma, and several of his family members. The cost of the wedding was estimated to be around $3.5 million. 3 fixed-wing aircraft, 7 helicopters, 88 vehicles, and 490 military personnel were involved in ensuring the safety of the Gupta family's guests, and within minutes of the plane landing, the media, the ANC, and opposition parties started asking how it was possible that a private citizen could misuse state resources like that. A parliamentary inquest was ordered, and within the next few days, it would be revealed that the Guptas had already started arranging for the arrival of their guests in 2012, and that the plane had been authorized to land by none other than Jacob Zuma himself. Multiple ministers and key figures in the South African Air Force were also involved, and more than one was forced to submit their resignation in the wake of the scandal. This led to the media referring to the incident as Guptagate, and Parliament called for a public debate on the 22nd of May 2013 to discuss the matter, the very first of its kind since the year 2000. This put the spotlight not only on Jacob Zuma's actions, but also on his involvement with the Gupta family. The 3 Gupta brothers, Ajay, Atul, and Rajesh, had all emigrated to South Africa in 1993 and started out selling shoes out the back of their cars. They would later establish an IT company called Sahara Computers, and within a few years, the Guptas were millionaires and then billionaires, with Atul being named the 7th wealthiest person in South Africa in 2016. It was also common knowledge that the Guptas were avid supporters of Jacob Zuma and the ANC, with David Mania, a former member of the National Assembly, explaining in May 2013 that there is a widely held perception that when the Guptas say jump, the president says, how high? So why are we surprised that when the Guptas said jump, some senior officials said how high? In the months following Guptagate, investigative journalists and opposition parties started taking a closer look at both the Guptas and Jacob Zuma's finances, and it soon became clear that the two were intricately linked. Several members of Jacob Zuma's family, most notably one of his sons, Dudu Zane, were employed by Oak Bay Investments, a Gupta-owned company. In 2007, Dudu Zane Zuma started working at Sahara Computers as a simple IT graduate. In July 2008, he was made a director of a Gupta-owned company called Mambagela Investments and paid a meager 25 Rand for his shares in the company. 2 years later, he was listed as a director in 9 Gupta-owned companies and was worth hundreds of millions of rands. Well-respected investigative news agencies soon started reporting on the many shady deals that the Gupta family and Dudu Zane were involved with, which included winning a 30 million Rand contract to build and manage a state-of-the-art dairy farm. This project had been speculated to earn the Guptas 342 million Rand within 3 years in return for producing 100,000 litres of milk a day. However, in June 2013, local investigative newspaper Ama Bagane reported that the Free State's Department of Agriculture was set to pay 100 million Rand per year as an annual grant to help the newly established dairy farm, Estina, meet its goals. A year later, however, it would turn out that Estina was a cash cow. The facilities were unfinished. The dairy cows the Guptas had bought were either starving or dead, and the Guptas had used the farm to launder the 140 million rands they had received from the Free State Department's agriculture through their businesses in Dubai. That money had then been used to finance the extravagant wedding of their niece a year earlier. In 2014, Abu Bagane reported that the Guptas had won an exclusive contract to provide coal to the struggling power utility Eskom and had been involved in a 50 billion Rand deal to supply the state's transport agency Transnet with new trains. In 2015, the Guptas also opened a new broadcasting agency called ANN7 and a newspaper called New Age News, which served to paint Jacob Zuma and the ANC in a positive light and which many respected news agencies soon labelled as an obvious propaganda tool. But it wasn't long before these investigative journalists were being labelled as rumourmongers themselves, with many online commentators calling them slaves of white monopoly capital, a reference to the so-called white elite who secretly ruled over South Africa's economy. In March 2016, the Deputy Financial Minister, Mcebisi Jonas, revealed that the Guptas had offered him the position of Finance Minister in 2015, and not long after, an ANC MP called Fakey Mentor also revealed that the Guptas had once offered her a ministerial position, leading to the media speculating that the Guptas were secretly running the country. That same month, the public prosecutor, Thuli Madonsela, announced that she would be investigating these allegations of state capture, and her report was presented to Parliament on the 14th of October 2016. In a report, Madonsela reported that evidence provided to her suggested that President Zuma had allowed the Guptas to be involved in the process of selecting various members of the cabinet, the board of directors of several state-owned enterprises, and had ordered banks and other financial institutions to turn a blind eye to the Guptas' corrupt business enterprises. Of course, Jacob Zuma denied these allegations and called it an attack on his person by white monopoly capital. But then the bomb dropped, and the whole country soon learned exactly how much say the Guptas had in how South Africa was managed. Early in 2017, human rights lawyer Brian Curran was given a hard drive that contained thousands of emails between the Guptas, the Zumas, and several ministers and prominent business figures. Curran shared these emails with the editors of Ama Bugane, and they provided proof that everything their investigative reporters had been speculating over the past years was true. The Guptas had bought their way into not only the government, but several of the country's state-owned enterprises as well. In a way, they were running everything. According to journalist Susan Comrie, quote, "The evidence suddenly is there, and it says, you're not just right, it's far worse than you thought it was." Now, these emails would become known as the Gupta leaks. Now, they painted a very dark picture. Not only did they confirm all the claims that Mandan Sella had made in a state capture report, but they also explained that the Guptas were using the state's intelligence agencies to keep a wary eye on anyone who would oppose them. They had also used a British PR firm, Bell Pottinger, to stoke racial tension in South Africa by introducing the concept of white monopoly capital. Within the next few weeks, several media houses released articles on the information contained in the Gupta leak emails, and the South African public was furious. On the 12th of April 2017, South Africans protested in cities all over the country and loudly called for Zuma's resignation. The Mail and Guardian called it possibly the largest march in post-apartheid history, and reported the protesters ranked from the poorest of the poor to the CEOs of JSE-listed companies. Zuma's popularity within the ANC had also taken a hit, and on the 18th of November 2017, he lost his position as ANC president and was succeeded by his deputy, Cyril Ramaphosa. Calls for his resignation only became louder in the weeks that followed, and in January 2018, Zuma was court-ordered to establish a public inquiry into state capture. A month later, Zuma was finally forced to resign as president, and he warned that his dismissal would result in the ANC being plunged into a crisis that I'm sure my comrade leaders will regret. That same morning, the Hawks raided the Guptas' multi-million rand compound and other properties and reportedly arrested 3 people. However, the Guptas had already started selling off their South African business interests in 2016 and had fled to Dubai, where they were joined by Dudu Zane Zuma. The inquiry into state capture, better known as the Zondo Commission, began on the 21st of August 2018 and lasted until the 15th of June 2022. According to the Democratic Alliance's report on the implementation of the recommendations made by the Zondo Commission, quote, "It took over 4 years, 300 witnesses, 3,171 summonses, over 8.6 million pages of documents, and approximately 1 billion rands worth of taxpayer money to implicate over 1,438 people by evidence in the State Capture Commission reports by Chief Justice Raymond Zondo." During these hearings, the South African public was told that Zuma had been planning his coup for more than a decade. His first step, when he assumed power, had been to get rid of the Scorpions. He then used the state security agency's funds to pay for several ANC political activities to fight political battles within the ANC so that they ended in his favor. He also used them to neutralize political activist movements that spoke up against either him or the ANC, kept the state security agency from conducting proper investigations into state corruption, and paid himself millions of rand a month out of their operational budget. The COO of Bosasa told the commission how they'd pay millions in bribes to prominent ANC ministers in exchange for government contracts, and even showed a video of him placing 1 million rand cash in a bag, something that was a monthly occurrence. Athol Williams, a former partner in the US-based consulting firm Bain & Company, explained that they'd been hired by Zuma to help restructure the South African Revenue Service's automated systems and impede its ability to investigate organized crime in an attempt to keep tax officials at SARS from picking up on the corruption within the state. Auditing firms like KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers were also implicated in state capture, with a partner at KPMG being identified as having turned a blind eye during audits of the Gupta's money farm, Estina, while PwC failed to call out the number of red flags they picked up during an audit of South African Airways finances. The commission also found that the Guptas would move select businessmen and politicians from one state-owned enterprise to the next, just long enough for them to ensure that the Guptas were awarded crucial government contracts before they were moved to the next enterprise, leaving these businesses in shambles. Ministers who opposed these appointments or questioned these contracts were subsequently removed from office and were replaced by the Guptas with ministers who were already deep inside their pockets, and the ANC and Zuma's cronies all benefited from the extensive corruption that took place at these SEOs. Meanwhile, thousands of businesses closed down and the South African economy started to struggle, all while the Guptas and their associates raked in billions. Their actions had cost hundreds of thousands of people their jobs, and the cost to South Africa's economy was estimated to be between $17 and $100 billion. As part of its report on state capture, the commission found that Jacob Zuma should face charges for corruption and racketeering. They also found that several ministers and businessmen should be investigated for their role in state capture, and that the Guptas should be prosecuted for corruption. But in the years since, not much has been done to bring them to justice. In June 2022, an attempt was made to extradite Atul and Rajesh Gupta from the United Arab Emirates to South Africa, but it failed. The eldest Gupta brother, AJ, has since returned to India and was arrested in May 2024 after he was implicated in the suicide of a business associate who he had been blackmailing. No official charges have so far been laid against him in South Africa. Duduzane Zuma started his own political party called All Game Changers, and Zuma is again facing the same 16 criminal charges that had been charged with in 2006. His trial began on the 26th of May 2021 and is set to resume in April 2025, if at all. At this point, we wouldn't be surprised if it just quietly disappears from the court roster. In 2022, President Cyril Ramaphosa promised that the ANC will do better in the future and explains that those responsible for state capture would be arrested and held accountable. But so far, the bare minimum has been done to implement the findings listed in the Zondo Commission's report. No arrests have been made, no one has been to court, and the Hawks and the National Prosecution Authority have both explained that they simply do not have the budgets to investigate and prosecute the people who'd been implicated by the Zondo Commission's investigation. Not after Zuma and his cronies cut their wings back in 2007, a move that served him very well in the decade that followed. During South Africa's national elections in May 2024, South Africans made their displeasure with the ruling party known. The ANC managed to get just 40.18% of the national vote, a sharp drop from their 57.5% majority in 2019. The ANC blamed the poor performance on the meteoric rise of the newly established MK party, which gained popularity after Jacob Zuma threw his support behind it. But as former President Thabo Mbeki explained, disillusionment with the ANC has been growing for decades due to perceptions of endemic corruption and patronage, diversion of state resources, and certain anti-democratic tendencies. A big reason for the ANC's loss of support is the fact that 70% of the voters who cast their votes on the 29th of May were between the ages of 21 and 29. They are known as the Born Frees, the generation who were born after South Africa's very first democratic election, the generation who grew up without the yoke of apartheid and who were supposed to have the same advantages as their white counterparts. And yet they are the ones who are impacted the most by the legacy of state capture. Statistics show that 45.5% of them are unemployed, despite many of them having earned degrees and at least some work experience. They don't feel the same loyalty to the ANC as their parents and grandparents did. They are acutely aware of the ANC's faults, and they plan on keeping their preferred political candidates responsible for their actions. The ANC's drop in support led to the establishment of South Africa's very first coalition government, and now members of the opposition are ruling alongside ANC stalwarts. They've also been appointed in some very key positions, with the hope being that they can help turn South Africa's economy around. When President Cyril Ramaphosa announced his current cabinet members in July 2024, he declared that this would be the beginning of a new era for South Africa. This new government of national unity is still young, and while many of the new ministers have made noteworthy steps toward ridding their departments of the stains left behind by state capture, only time will tell if South Africa as a whole will ever recover from the legacy of the Guptas.